In a shifting world order where superpowers don't lead as they once did, does Canada know what it wants or how to get it? From trouble with China and Afghanistan to being left out of a new security pact, it's been a tough few months for this country's foreign affairs. Is it a sign of worse things to come? Let's ask. In the nation's capital, Lauren Dobson-Hughes, Gender and Development Principal at LDH Consulting. And Garry Keller, Vice President at Strategy Corp, previously Chief of Staff to former Foreign Minister John Baird. In Waterloo, Ontario, Bessma Momani, Professor of Political Science at the University of Waterloo and a Senior Fellow at CIGI, the Centre for International Governance Innovation. And in Midtown of the provincial capital, Adam Chapnik, Professor of Defence Studies at the Royal Military College of Canada and Deputy Director of Education at the Canadian Forces College. And it's great to have you four on TVO tonight. We almost apparently never talk foreign policy during election campaigns. Did a tiny bit at the beginning of this last one because of Afghanistan. And as a result, let's just get us started here by reading an excerpt of a piece Lauren wrote dealing with the Afghanistan fiasco, and it goes like this. Overall, our foreign policy and development work has suffered from a lack of long-term strategic planning and coherence. Canada tends to hyper-focus on the minute details at the tactical level, but has much less ability to anticipate broader trends and challenges. It's classic Canadian risk aversion, leading to disastrous paralysis. This country's bureaucracy tends to overanalyze issues until they are so fraught that any action seems effectively impossible. Yet in crises, the risk of inaction is often greater than the risk presented by action itself. Inaction is also a risk. Lauren, can you just amplify on that a bit? Our typical Canadian risk aversion is getting us in trouble, you think?
I'm going to answer with my original British citizenship hat on. Yeah, I think, talking about Afghanistan, I think we can hold in one hand that many people did heroic, wonderful, important, good things, and individuals. The point I was making is that they shouldn't have had to. If your system of responding to crises, of which we are going to face many more in an increasingly fractured and unstable world, if your system for responding to crises depends on stretching individual people past their max, that's not a good system. We need systemic, system-wide institutional ability to respond to what we're likely seeing is the age of a golden era over with increasingly complex crises.
Garry, how much, when you were working for John Baird, how much of what you just heard described did you run into on a regular basis?
I read Lauren's piece, and knowing Lauren, a little bit about Lauren's background, I suspect that there isn't a lot we may agree on in terms of policy prescriptions. But I read her piece, and it was absolutely bang on so many different ways. Official Ottawa is risk adverse. It, prides looking at all the options before taking action, and even then it has to be pushed and kicked and screaming to doing so. I think it's a number of occasions where we said we should take a leading position on this. The prime minister want to take a leading position on this. Yeah, but what are the Brits doing? What are the Americans doing? It's like, no, this is a priority of the government from a foreign policy perspective. We should be taking the lead on this. And the number of occasions where I was flashing back where, there were cases, I think of a typhoon in the Philippines, where the officials were more focused on the rest time for the challenger to get the officials to the Philippines rather than dealing with the crisis itself until a minister came in and yelled at somebody. And that was the other point in Lauren's piece, is the fact that calling an election when the Liberals did meant that the political actors needed to be focused 100% of the time on rescuing people in Afghanistan. Their attention was completely divided on the minutiae and day-to-day of the election campaign, which meant that delays happened. The bureaucracy didn't have enough direct minute-to-minute direction from the political masters because they were busy focused on other things.
All right. Having said that, though, Bessma, Lauren does write about the inability to anticipate broader trends and challenges. And I have to tell you, that is probably something that could be said about every foreign policy bureaucracy of every Western nation all the time. So are we really that much worse than everybody else on this?
Well, I think at the core of it is it's about investment. Quite simply, systems cost money. It's not just about, putting all these pieces together that somehow are not coherent enough. There's also a reality that we don't spend enough on diplomacy, on foreign policy, on development, all of the core principles we want to engage with, I think, in terms of our rhetoric and our normative values. But when you look at the hard dollars, it's not there. And so what you get out of this system is exactly what you put into it, financially speaking. There's so many things that need to be changed and done, including, expanding the human capital within foreign affairs. There's a real dearth of local knowledge about so many places that we're interested in globally inside GAC. I mean, you can go on and on. I think there is certainly that system-wide thinking is just not there enough. Absolutely risk averse. But also, this is the reality. Most Canadians don't vote on foreign policy. Most Canadians, frankly, don't care about the international affairs in the same way that perhaps other countries do. So the politicians are responding to exactly what Canadians want, which is focus on the home front, focus on healthcare, focus on the environment, the economy. And again, I disagree with that. And I would be happy to sort of make the case for more investment. But I just think that politicians respond to exactly what Canadians want, which is a very introverted lens on the world and not really investing a lot of money. And that's to our detriment.
Well, in fact, there was a big development on this front last week, and that was the announcement. And Adam, I'll get you to start on this. The United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, to the surprise of all of its NATO allies, announced this new pact. Am I saying it right? AUKUS, AUKUS, military intelligence partnership. Joe Biden, the American president, said the United States has no more reliable ally in the world than Australia. I mean, Adam, he used to say that kind of stuff about us. What's going on here?
Well, it's interesting because this announcement doesn't bother me nearly as much as some of the other things that the panelists are talking about. In this case, Australia had a deal with France to buy submarines, and they didn't like it. They found a better deal with the United States, didn't seem to tell the French all that much about it. The Americans brought the British in. They signed a new pact. They added some nice words around it to make it more than just a pact. But the French took it as a stab in the back. In this case, I don't want to see Canada in the middle of a disagreement between some of its most important allies. I'm actually quite happy that we're outside of this. Not that I'm surprised that we're outside of it, but this isn't one of those things where we really want to be in the middle. We need the United States, France, Australia, the United Kingdom to get along. We can't have them fighting, and being on one side or the other doesn't get rid of this fight.
No, I appreciate that. But Lauren, this seems like a fairly significant new development, a new institution in international affairs. Most of the allies seem to have been caught off guard by the fact it happened, and we're not part of it. Is that problematic?
I mean, I would agree with Adam that, yes, it was what it was. No, it wasn't ideal from a number of reasons. But when you look at the last 2 years, it does not surprise me that you're seeing these increasingly fractured alliances. You're seeing, if we start from the start of COVID, where what we needed was international solidarity and we needed some leadership. People talk about leadership in a very ephemeral, throw the word around way. But we needed a group of people who are in charge and have been elected to make hard decisions, coming together and say, this is a frightening time. Here's what we're going to do together. Here's how we're going to get through it. And instead, we just had everybody for themselves, these very sort of tactical and self-interested trading of vaccines, for example, or short-term allegiances for domestic reasons. And you've seen that continue. You saw the G7 as well at odds and fractured, even without Trump in place. And so, no, it doesn't surprise me that 18 months after that, we're continuing to fracture, and with these short-termist alliances for domestic reasons, it's a pattern that's likely to continue, I would guess.
Garry, can I get you on that? Does it say anything of significance to the fact that we didn't know about this, we're not part of it, and yet here it is?
Well, I think I'd split the difference between Adam and Lauren. I think you can't ignore that part of this is actually about a nuclear submarine deal. There are some issues around military procurement. There's some straight business interest, dollars and cents issues around that aspect of it. You can't deny that that's absolutely part of it. But the other side of it too is this area around information sharing. And for a long time, there's been accusations that Canada hasn't been doing this part. I read a recent piece by Stephanie Carvin, who talked about Canada's involvement in the Five Eyes community, which is the three countries we've talked about, plus Canada and New Zealand. And for a long time, Australia has been playing a much more leading role in information sharing and active role in the Five Eyes, maybe than Canada has been. And that requires investment and taking part in it. I think what is more concerning from an ally standpoint, and hearing Biden's comments, is that increasingly there are a number of regional forums around the world, whether it's the Quad, whether it's other forums, where Canada has remained disinterested. And my former colleague, Howard Anglin, who was a Deputy Chief of Staff to Prime Minister Harper and worked a lot on foreign policy issues as well, said, as Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau has shown little interest in strategic defense or geopolitics. That means that Canada's foreign policy has largely been left to the gray men and women of the Pearson Building. The problem with this approach is that you stop showing up for your friends, eventually they stop inviting you. And I think that are some wise words that are worth considering when we talk about this new alliance.
Bessma, I see you nodding your head. You think we're just not worth inviting to these parties anymore?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, what are we bringing to the table, frankly? And I really don't think this is just about nuclear-powered subs. What's on the table here is really fundamental. It's about emerging technologies. We're talking about artificial intelligence. We're talking about quantum, cybersecurity, even industrial policy, talking about supply chains. I mean, this is a very comprehensive pact. And I think the fact that we're excluded says a lot. And frankly, this is not a time when we should be not just only excluded, but, sort of shortchanging our own investment in these issues. This is the wave of the future. It is like investing in the internet, 25 years ago, thinking, it's okay if other people do it, we don't have to do it. It's not that way. We need to put more into this. So I think the emerging technology piece is key. This is where we need to put more money in it. And the fact that we are excluded, I think says something about the fact that, Canada doesn't bring a lot to the table.
Can you follow up with this, Bessma? Because I want to put that line to you that Joe Biden used in his speech at the United Nations, where he talked about this being an inflection point in history. I guess for starters, an inflection point from what to what?
Well, I mean, I think he was, he had several audiences at play. Certainly the one issue that he was talking about was, doubling down on multilateralism, the need for multilateralism. This is really, I think, basically a swipe at Trump and the whole nationalist populist movement that continues to take over the world unabated. And the fact that we need organizations like the United Nations, he was certainly, I think, doubling down on the need. He didn't provide, I think, a lot of, excitement about, investing in the UN. I mean, he talked about, putting more money towards diplomacy and helping strengthening the capacity of developing countries, which was quite remarkable when it comes to climate change. But beyond that, I don't think there was a lot of very interesting stuff other than the old usual sort of doubling down on liberal internationalism. But what I would say here is that actually what we found Biden suggesting was also really about China. And you could say in one way, look, Australia was, invited into AUKUS because, this is their backyard, and we need them to have the nuclear-powered submarines to be able to monitor the seas. I mean, they share the seas with China and so forth, and we're not necessarily nearly as concerned about that as perhaps Australia is. But at the same time, I think what Biden, I think was trying to tell the world is that this is a moment. I mean, he tried not to use the word Cold War. He was very careful, but China's rise, and particularly under President Xi, is problematic. I mean, President Xi in many ways is that nationalist populist leader. He's got lots of Trumpian qualities in his own way. And so I think this was a combined effort of really suggesting that we need multilateralism, and the nationalist populists like Xi and others need to be countered by the democratic countries of the world.
Adam, if this is an inflection point in history, as the president described it, is there, I don't know, in your view, is there a Canadian perspective on this inflection point?
I think from a Canadian point of view, Biden's call for greater multilateralism, for countries to combine forces, is exactly what we need, because we can't do anything alone. We aren't effective alone. And our interests are best met when all of our allies, and we have a lot of them, are on the same page in terms of what to do. We obviously have some real problems with China ourselves, and the problems we can't solve on our own. So for President Biden to say he's interested in working together with us on this, I'd like to see more action behind it, but it's a good thing for Canada. And I think the key for Canada here is to match our rhetoric to our action. And I know that some of the panelists have suggested we have to therefore scale up our action to meet our rhetoric, but we could also tone down our rhetoric to match what the Canadian public is willing to invest in these issues. I don't think that should be excluded from the list of options here. I think it's really important to our allies that they can rely on us, that our word is good. And if we can't match these big aspirational speeches that sometimes come out of our governments, then we should be humble about that and clear about that and say, when we will come to the table, this is what we have, and then be steady on that. I don't think that's such a bad thing.
Well, in fact, here's what you had to write in the Dorchester Review about that and other issues related to it. Ottawa's global calculus is due for a change, Adam writes. Canada's international toolkit is overhyped and underfunded. Our diplomatic corps is disillusioned and dominated by political appointees. Our military faces a cultural reckoning and overwhelming procurement challenges. Our aid budget is barely growing, even while the COVID-19 pandemic has caused global poverty to skyrocket. In this context, global followership is hardly something to be ashamed of. The world needs more responsible, reliable, secondary players. States that do their share without complaint, led by serious practitioners who do not crave the spotlight. Humility is a virtue in international politics. Let's get back to that. Okay, Lauren, let me give you the first word on that. That was Adam's word in the Dorchester Review. What do you say on that?
I go to reliability. Sometimes, when I referred earlier that not all the panelists may have the same political agreement, sometimes the most important thing is not that we agree, it's that we have a steady, consistent position and we are good to our word. And when I think about the work I do and bring it back to that human element, there are people. This is not just a policy, high level, big talk conversation. There are actual people, women in Afghanistan who were funded for 10 years to work on contraception delivery and abortion access. And we put them out there and we funded them to do incredibly dangerous work. If they cannot rely on us to then protect them and have their backs, we shouldn't be saying we can do it. We should, like Adam says then, we should downscale in response. If we are not willing to fund and invest and build capacity and build a skill set within our foreign policy development community, then we should stop saying that we can do all these things. Because to our allies, the reliability and that they can trust, even if they don't always agree with us, that they can predict how we're going to respond, the ability to predict other people's positioning and responses is probably one of the most valuable things. Unpredictability and rash actors send the whole system into chaos. So yeah, I really think so.
Okay, let me put this to Garry then. When you were working in the Stephen Harper government, would you have been content being described, as Adam's suggestion indicates, being described as a reliable secondary player on the world stage?
I think it depends, and I think it depends on the issue. I think there are certain times and places where that's the correct role for Canada to play, but I also think there's times when Canada can take leadership positions and is actually relied on by the international community to use its standing in the world to play those leadership positions. In the lead up to this election, I spoke to a lot of the diplomatic community who, wanted to know the latest on the political intrigue and what it meant necessarily for foreign policy. And, in talking to them, I asked, how Canada is seen in their home countries. And almost virtually everyone of them said, look, everybody loves Canada. Canada's a nice place. But, you don't really show up. When you show up, you talk a lot of nice words, but you don't deliver. And a key example of that was the peacekeeping commitment by the Trudeau government, which has been no source of trouble for this government, where, we're going to be there. Yes, we're going to be there. We're going to have peacekeepers. And then it's delay. And when we do show up, we show up for 6 months or a year, and then we leave. And, for a lot of the international community, that's not good enough. They expect more from Canada. And it takes political leadership. It doesn't help, and this is a hallmark of conservative and liberal governments, to keep shuffling around foreign affairs ministers. The Liberals have had 4 foreign ministers in 6 years, and Chrystia Freeland, who was the longest serving one, most of her time was focused on the trade deal with the states, with Trump, and dealing with the new NAFTA, not focused on real foreign policy issues. The Conservatives also had a number of foreign ministers in their first couple of years, and when you don't have that strong, steady political leadership, it's easy for policy drift to happen. And I really think we should, call on our political actors to really, have that presence in our foreign ministries.
If memory serves, I think one of those former foreign ministers from the Conservative Times is now the head of the People's Party. It's funny where some people end up sometimes. I want to read, Bessma, to you just the last line of Adam's piece again, which said, "Humility is a virtue in international politics. Let's get back to that." Do you think Canadian foreign policy is not humble enough these days?
Well, it's humble. Back to Adam's great piece. I really thought it was a fantastic, coverage of the issues. But look, rhetoric is cheap. Some might even argue it's free, right? But action requires investment. Action requires money invested. That's where we're missing. I don't think we lack the leadership or even, frankly, the capability. By that, I mean sort of the gumption to do stuff. We certainly have convening power. Everybody talks about our great convening power. Our reputation is stellar. But at the end of the day, we don't show up with a lot. We show up. We'd love to join every organization available to us. The joke is we'd join the African Union if invited, but we don't come with stuff. We don't come with money. We don't come with resources. We expect the rhetoric to take us places. And that, I think, is back to Adam's point. That's not humility. Don't come and offer a lot and say you've got a lot to offer, but then really put nothing forward.
Adam, can I just understand what that means? When Canada shows up but doesn't offer a lot, we could improve upon that by showing up and offering what, for example?
Well, I would look at it 2 ways. One way would be to say we're joining because we want to do X. And in order to do X, it costs this amount, and this is what we're willing to bring forward. The other way is to show up and say, we're here, but we don't have much to offer, period. And then people can adjust to the way it is. If they don't want us there, they can make that clear. If they're happy to have us there for the sake of the connections we have or the convening power, whatever smaller things we can do, that's great as well. The problem is when we say we're here to help, and then people say, okay, great. And then we say, hold on. That's to me, that is the issue.
All right. I want to raise a name that I think you got to be over 60 to remember who this guy was. So for those of our younger viewers and listeners right now, the name Mitchell Sharp may not mean anything, but half a century ago, Mitchell Sharp was a very big deal in this country. He was our foreign minister in the current prime minister's father's government, and he formulated a 3-pronged strategy for Canada's foreign policy going forward. And the idea was, 1, maintain an ambiguous status quo, 2, firmly anchor Canada in the American orbit, or 3, foster the foundations of a more independent posture on the world stage. So let's get into some of this. Lauren, half a century later, which of those 3 Mitchell Sharp principles do you think is most reasonable to go after today?
So I'm going to declare that A, I'm not over 60, and B, I am not from Canada originally. So
I think we knew that from the accent. That's okay.
Yes, those who did not clue in. Look, I think this for me takes us to sort of, those are 3 clearly well articulated goals. They are specific, they could be measurable, they could be deliverable. What we currently don't have in Canada is something like that. I have not been a fan of the Canadian knee-jerk, we need a blue ribbon panel, or a national soul-searching conversation that goes on for 10 years and is headed by 3 Supreme Court justices. And, but I am increasingly slightly convinced of the case that Canada needs some sort of strategy like this. Pick 3, any 3 or 5. We always do 3 or 5. But look at where Canada's got a value add, where it can add to the conversation. I would argue it needs to take a decolonial approach to that. But I think, just having 3 specific targets, because we can't do everything. We can't lead everywhere. As much as Canadians love this kind of ephemeral leadership thing, We need to burst that bubble that that's possible on everything. And then we fund and resource the 3 things we say we're going to do, and we follow through on them.
All right, Bessma, let me put those 3 Mitchell Sharp ideas to you. He offered those 3 options for Canadian foreign policy going forward. 50 years later, which do you think is the best approach?
Oh, I'm going to give you a non-answer. I mean, I just don't think it's really relevant in the post-Cold War world. I mean, he lived in a different time. I think, look, we need to be nimble. We need to take on boutique issues and do it well. We're not going to do everything. We're a middle power. We have to be cognizant of our capability. But when we put our minds to one issue and do it well, then we provide, I think, a valuable service. I'm not a fan of the terminology, but the feminist foreign policy is a great one. Investing in gender equity is something that needs to be done. It's not being done enough. It requires, I think, true and utter financing to do it well. So we need to match it with, the real dollars and cents that's required. And certainly Lauren's mentioning of, abandoning Afghan women is a disaster. But that's where I think we've, chosen a very boutique issue and we're doing it well. I think we could invest more in it and it'll be appreciated because we know all the evidence out there, academic and policy evidence suggests that invest in women, you're investing in countries' long-term health and longevity. This is really a very, I think, doable project. But that's where I think we need to do is to really focus on one issue, 2 issues, do it well. Don't try to be everything to everybody because we won't succeed. We don't have the kinds of resources. And keep in mind, yet again, Canadians still don't put foreign policy as the top of their agenda. So governments are cognizant of that. We can't be everywhere. Just choose the issues that I think will do the most good.
Well, Garry, the reality is, every poll shows this, Canadians are simply not, and particularly during election campaigns, Canadians are not that interested in foreign affairs. I know we've had Erin Kelly on this program numerous times in which she saw, for probably the first time in ages, significant engagement on the issue of Afghanistan, but it lasted for a few days and then disappeared. So my question is, what kind of truly renewable, a renewed commitment to Canada's place on the world stage and doing something, the boutique issues that Bessma just referred to, how is it possible to get any kind of political capital behind that when the public seems to be just not that interested in it?
Well, good question. And I think it has to be part and parcel of a government's principles. To know that there may not be a large political benefit to doing this, but Canada has to stand for something on the world stage, and a government that lays out its policy priorities will implement and pursue those priorities. With Afghanistan too, while it certainly in the first couple of days of the campaign really popped up, it was less about the geopolitics and it was more directly about the competence of the government. When we saw pictures of, people stranded at Kabul airport and pictures of planes empty because there weren't enough seatbelts, and the foreign minister saying, well, we don't know if we're going to recognize the Taliban or not. That was really like a competence issue to the government's narrative overall, which is one of the reasons why I think they had a hit in the first few days. But we also have to, I think, recognize a couple of things. One, governments sometimes do make foreign policy priorities, and they should be weighed on those decisions and foreign policy priorities and not accused of some sort of hidden agenda or some sort of, political machinations behind the scenes for making those decisions. Sometimes they're legitimate decisions, and policy priorities, and you can have that debate and keep the politics out of it. But I think all political parties know that you're not going to likely win or lose elections or votes based on a lot of foreign policy issues, but it's part and parcel of what you do as a country and as a government. And you need to pursue your goals and your interests, even if it has little to no political payoff. The flip side is if you don't do that, then you're all over the map and you stand for nothing.
Well, okay, but and with a couple of minutes to go here, Adam, I'll put this to you. We've seen from pollsters, and you have all acknowledged it here tonight, that the Canadian public, when it comes to foreign policy, that is just well down the list of their priority areas. Does that suggest that foreign policy, the discussion thereof, how to find the right path going forward? I mean, this is something that the elites are going to be worried about, the elites are going to be focused on, and that's the way it is, Adam?
Well, I think we've got it a little bit backwards in that Canadians will be much more interested in foreign policy when other countries recognize our effectiveness, instead of when we brag about our own effectiveness or complain about our ineffectiveness. I think the key to building Canada's reputation is to allow it to come from the outside. It happens in music as well. Canadians don't recognize their own artists until they win awards internationally. Same thing here. So my suggestion would be we shut up and act. We don't need to talk so much about foreign policy. What we need is to do things competently. Ultimately, if we do that consistently and reliably, our allies will appreciate us. It's that appreciation that will get Canadians interested, not stuff we say, because it's not as legitimate. It's baked into the political rhetoric. But when other countries appreciate us, the public might notice and start getting more curious. So I think we should be saying less, talking less about principles and values and all the rest, and simply doing the hard grunt work of foreign policy. If we can get back to that eventually, that will be appreciated.
Last 30 seconds to Lauren on that. Does this seem to be a government that is of the shut up and act variety and not boast about what they do?
I think we're writing off Canadians by saying they don't care about foreign policy. There are no votes in R&D tech hubs in wherever. We do things because they matter, not because there is a micro-targeted niche identified by your data collection geniuses. I think we link local to global. We talk to Canadians about why this matters in a tangible way, why vaccine equity in Africa directly impacts their safety here in Canada. And like Adam says, we do it.
Wonderful. I want to thank the four of you for coming on to TVO tonight and sharing your views. Lauren Dobson-Hughes, Adam Chapnik, Bessma Momani, Garry Keller. Be well, everybody, and we'll see you again down the road.
Great to be with you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.